If you have to maintain different versions of an application, depending on your workflow, you may have to downgrade your database to a previous state. So in this lecture, I'm going to show you how you can downgrade your database with Entity Framework. Imagine this timeline represents the commit in your repository. And here are the versions of the application that are tagged or represented using a branch. So currently, we're working here. Now you have a task to fix a bug in version 2. With any version control systems, you can easily check out an earlier version. Now, in terms of bringing your database to the right state for that version, you have two choices. You can check out the older version, change the database name in connection string to point to a non-existing database, and then run update database. Entity Framework will run all migrations from the beginning of time up to the version you have checked out from the repository. So that's pretty easy. But sometimes you may have existing data, like production data in your database, and you don't want to start from a blank database. If that's the case, you probably need to use a single database for maintaining all versions of your application. Then you need to bring this database to the right state. So in terms of process, imagine these are the migrations that you have created as part of each version. So the last migration in version 2 is migration F. Now, what you need to do is, with the latest source code, run update database and supply the target migration. In this case, migration F. Entity Framework looks at your database and finds out that the latest migration run on the database is migration H. So to go to migration F, it needs to revert migration H and G. Since migration G and H are in your project in the latest version, it will run the down method on these migrations to restore your database to the state after migration F was executed. Now that your database is in the right state, you can check out the older version of your application from repository and start your work. So at this point, both your model and your database are in sync. Now, when you finish your work, you can check out the latest version and do another update database to bring your database to the latest version. With that, let me show you a demo of this process. So back to Visual Studio, imagine this is the latest version of our application. And we want to go back in time to a previous version. And just for the purpose of this demo, let's imagine this migration here was the last migration in the previous version. So the two migrations after are what I'm currently working on in the latest version. Now to go back to the previous version, I want to update the database and bring it back to the state after this migration was executed. Before doing that, let's go to the database. Let's take a look at our migration history table. So look, these are the migrations that we have currently run on this database. So the last migration is delete categories table. I want to restore the state of the database to the state after the 6th migration was run. That is, delete date published column from courses table. So back to Visual Studio. In Package Manager console, we run update database. And here we need to specify the target migration. Here you need to specify the migration name. So in this case, that's delete date published column from courses table. You don't need to specify the date timestamp that is used in the migration file name. So just the migration name, which is the name of the class, is sufficient. Okay, look, Entity Framework reverted two migrations. Delete categories table and delete category column from courses table. So back to our database. We refresh the data in the migration history table. Look, those migrations are deleted from this table. And our database is in the state after this last migration was run. So now that we have taken our database to a previous state, we can check out the older version of our application from our source code repository and start our work. When we finish our job, then to get back to the latest version, we check out the latest version from repository, go back to Visual Studio, run update database to bring the database to the latest version. So the key thing I want to emphasize here is whether you want to go back in time or you want to come back to the latest version, you should always do this with your latest source code in the repository. Let me explain the reason for that. In this particular example, we wanted to restore our database to the state after this migration was executed. So we had to revert the last two migrations, and these last two migrations are in the latest version of our application. If I go back to a previous version, we do not have these two migrations there. So when I run update database with the target migration, Entity Framework cannot find these two migrations to run their down method. So remember, whenever you want to change the version of your database, always do it in the latest version of your source code.